the location when I call
That should
your
call us to
name.
order, right?
Yes, that's true.
So I'd like to call the Tuesday, August 24th, 2021 meeting of the Independent Community Police Oversight Commission to order. Ms. Janess, would you please call the roll?
Sure. Commissioner Altman,
Ann Arbor, Michigan, Washington County.
thank you. Commissioner Walton,
Present in Ann Arbor, Michigan.
Commissioner Billups,
Present in Ann Arbor, Michigan.
Commissioner Carter,
Present in Ann Arbor.
Commissioner Birch, absent. Commissioner Mary,
Present Ann Arbor, Michigan.
Commissioner Ship,
Present Sterling Heights. And also I'm mobile right now, so it might be a little bit hard for me to speak if you guys calling me, just letting you know in advance.
okay, no problem, thank you. In Sterling Heights, you say?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Vice Chair Todoro
Present Ann Arbor, Michigan.
and Chair Jackson.
Present Pittsfield Township, Michigan.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. And everybody's got a chance to review the agenda. Is there any discussion, any proposed changes, or is there a motion to approve it as is?
A motion to approve the agenda for this meeting as is.
Is there a
Support.
second? Thank you, Ms. Carter. All in favor of approving the agenda, say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, motion carries. Now we've come to the time for public forum. If anyone would like to make any comment or have any discussion with us, they can do so by calling 877-853-5247. The meeting ID is 935-1520-9819. Denise, can you tell if anyone is on the line?
There's no one here presently.
Okay. We'll have another opportunity for public forum at the end of the meeting. In the interim, everyone should have gotten a copy of the June meeting minutes. Is there any discussion or are there any corrections to that? Or is there a motion to approve the minutes of the June meeting?
Yeah, I'll make a motion to, if no comments or changes to the minutes, I move to approve the minutes of our June meeting.
Support.
Thank you. All in favor of approving the June meeting minutes as they are? Say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so it looks like we have mostly new business today. One of those is that the complaint website, we will begin to have a public facing aspect to our complaint website, which means that on our website, we'll have a link that people will be able to go to in the next couple of weeks. Hopefully it will go live and people will be able to see a complaint number and see its status. They'll be able to see where it is. Is it sitting with the police, for example? Is it under investigation by them? Has it been reviewed by the police and is it back to us for review? Has the complaint gone through all of its stages and is it complete? So there's some other interim kind of status options in there, but people will be able to see that. They'll be able to see a broad description of the complaint, nothing that would identify anyone. So we wouldn't leave any identifying information in there. There won't be any names in there. Even if the complainant is not anonymous, we will not put their name there. We will just say, here's the case number, here's a general description of the complaint, and here's where it is in the process. And that is a step that we needed to kind of keep the public informed about the complaint review process, and of course, aids in transparency. People will be able to see, an accumulation of complaints throughout the year, and we think that will be helpful. Francis, do you want to add anything to that?
No, but as a side note, one of the things that this new system gives us is the information managers will now have access to another system screenshot that we're going to be able to see as the complaints come in to us. So before we would have a complaint come in and then Denise would copy and paste it and send it to us in a PDF. Now we're going to be able to actually have direct access to the dashboard. So we're going to be able to see the complaints. Once they come in, Denise will be able to notify us and say a complaint's come in, and then the information managers will be able to just log into this system and be able into this dashboard and be able to read the complaint right there from the dashboard itself.
So even though that won't be available to the public, that'll be something that the 5 people who are designated as information managers will have access to, and it'll give you more information about the incoming complaints a little bit earlier, even before they are signed out to people. If someone has a conflict, for example, they could recuse themselves from a specific case, something like that. If it's in a specific person's area of expertise, for example, they could say, I should be assigned to that case. And so it'll help us streamline the process a little bit as far as assigning people to the case and starting to get us the information a little bit sooner.
I have a question. Do we have any kind of, is it straightforward? Is it something that requires a little bit of introduction, explanation? How we are going to access? Is it just regular access to the link and that's it? Or
I think so, but as an information manager, we can have a training session just to make sure it is smooth, just so there's no errors. It looks pretty straightforward, but information managers, once it goes live, we could have a training session where we could get on together and just click the links and see how they work and that they work. And I think it's going to take a little bit of tweaking. Like, for example, we try to suggest some statuses, and as we go along, we might find that we need to add another sort of category or something like that. So I would imagine that we might have a little bit of tweaking to do in the first 6 months or so, but the system can accommodate that. But absolutely, we could train on it and go through it with a city staffer who can give us all the ins and outs.
Bonnie has his hand up he's an information manager. Do you have a question, Bonnie?
No, I just think it'll be great, as opposed to the fact that we have all these emails to open and things all over the place. They have everything centralized, because it's just a pain to try to keep track of everything. I think it cannot be worse than what we already have to try to keep organized. So I'm happy about it.
It's really interesting. Just as an aside, I saw some software, and I'm actually going to send you guys a link so that you can play around with it. Another software system that does this, but it also has like the government's highest level security clearance, and it directly connects with evidence.com. And so I know, and it's free to oversight agencies. It usually costs about 12 grand, but it would be able to, so everything would actually be in one place. And they work with actually law enforcement agencies and oversight and other aspects of government all over the country. And so it might be, I'm going to send you guys a link to like a sandbox so you can click and see. It is definitely prettier than the one that we have. It'd be easy to link to it on our website or for wherever, but it also would be easier because they have like the highest levels of encryption, and you have different levels of authentication so that you have, it's absolutely secure. And so even though this one is up and running, it doesn't preclude us looking at another one, and that one might be even more streamlined, but also a little bit easier for the public to read and decipher. Our form is, it's a pretty ugly form, but it's just kind of like a Word document almost. But so that'll be interesting. So I'll be sending you guys a link. I just got the links to the sandbox. And Councilmember Romlau, you had your hand up too.
Good evening, everybody. It's been a while, so hope everyone's doing well. This is really good news, good information to the public to learn about, and myself included. Just have a few questions regarding, the genesis of this, like who deserves credit for this, and I know we don't do what we do for credit, but it's be good to understand, the genesis and then also what type, who's it supported by, the funding that's going to be required? You just talked about this other type of software that did cost $12,000. So
No. I'm sorry. What this is built by the city. So it was a collaboration between IT, the city attorney's office certainly reviewed it. I'm tweaking the language as always with our commission. It's a collaborative effort. The software that I was talking about is actually free to us. I was saying it costs $12,000 in other contexts, but for
Yes.
oversight, it doesn't cost any money.
Okay.
But so there isn't any funding that would be required for that. But that's down the road. That's just something where commissioners can look at a sandbox and look at it, what's happening now and what's going to go live in the next couple of weeks, as soon as I can finish working on the language, is something generated by the city's IT department. So they were just kind of building out our website and the complaint process as the next iteration of that. So that was done by staffers here in Ann Arbor. And Francis, who spent a lot of time doing this, Ariane Slay was in there working on it. I'm just on the back end working on language. And then everybody will be reviewing it. So it's a collaboration. We're not giving anybody any, credit or anything, Ali.
Well, no, I think we heard who deserves, a little bit of accolades and appreciate the work that has been put into it. So just for my understanding of how it will work and how later it can be improved, as I think you referred to, it is going to need some tweaking once it goes into play, as we know.
It looks pretty good though. I think we were able to tweak a little bit yesterday with IT and so hopefully it'll be good to go. I think it'll be totally functional as soon as they make it live. I'm just thinking we might want to say, oh, it's in this stage of review, we might have to add another category, but I don't know that we might. It might be perfect as is. We haven't, tweaked the complaint review website at all since we, started as a commission. So we might not have to tweak this either.
Well, great.
He was able to take a lot of feedback in and use that. Jude, we can see you now.
Well, I look forward to seeing it and seeing how it works and the functionality before, speaking more on it. But it's exciting to hear. Thank you.
Yeah. I'm hoping it'll improve transparency just that much more.
Excuse me, Councilmember Ramwali, I want to acknowledge you and your location, please.
Ann Arbor, Michigan.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So next on our agenda is just wanted to update everyone that NACOL training is going on. I know the commissioners know that. Many of them are engaged in training. Training is happening pretty much every day. For most weeks, it's 5 days a week, and that'll go through October 7th. But I wanted to let the public know that these trainings are always open to the public. Any one session costs about $12 or $15, I think, if you're interested in a session, and you can go to nacole.org, NACOLE.org. We have thus far been engaged in looking at, been engaged in sessions talking about legislation, new legislation that's happened. We went to a session on the infiltration of white supremacy in law enforcement, sort of the history of that, and then talking about where it is currently and looking at research. So there were some researchers who published on, white supremacy organizations and their interaction with law enforcement in specific cases in law enforcement organizations. Today, we went to a session on civilian oversight of sheriff's departments, which you all know is quite different from a municipal police department. Sheriffs are elected, and I think they exist in 47 states, Alaska, Hawaii, and there was one other state in the Northeast that didn't. What was it, Connecticut?
Yeah.
Thank you. Connecticut that don't have sheriffs, but otherwise 47 states use sheriffs. And lots of people find that their role is constitutional. They're elected by their constituents, and thus oversight of them is very different. That doesn't necessarily apply to the work that we do, but it was really informative because some of the challenges are similar, some of the challenges are different, but I was really surprised at the overlap. And I think one of the things I took away from it, and I know others could speak to this too, was how oversight has to be iterative. We are so new in comparison to law enforcement, right? Law enforcement's been around, for 300 years, and oversight, has not been as prominent. It's not as prominent as it is right now, ever, but it has been evolving for the last 30 years, which is just a sliver of the time that law enforcement has existed. And so a lot of these professionals were talking about the need to change and evolve, and really stress the need for community outreach and for understanding what people in the community want and how people in the community want to be policed, and using that as the determinant of what law enforcement should do, and then thus how oversight should sort of operate. And that certainly applies to us. Anybody else want to talk about the session today, or?
Good.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Commissioner Carter.
I took the same things from today's session that you have spoken about, and but I also took away, one of the speakers was just talking about the importance of oversight, and I don't want to misquote him, but it was something he said, something to the effect of, if the community doesn't have oversight, we have no input, and we are actually under the control of an armed force. And I said, wow, I didn't think about it like that, but it's so true. If we don't have any input into the public servants that are there to serve and protect us. So I thought it was, although it didn't apply to our commission, I got some interesting information from it.
He made the analogy to how our U.S. military, as part of our Constitution, is governed by civilians, and that's an important layer to have, so that our armed forces are accountable to civilians and the expectations of civilians. And so he likened that relationship to that. He made that analogy.
Yeah.
So and he was talking about the importance of it, even in different power structures. A few people talked about the importance of subpoena power. However, other people talked about being in the room and being able to see information that the public can't see, and how important that is, because there isn't anybody else then who gets to look behind the curtain and then ask tough questions because of what they've seen. And that is one of the chief advantages of having civilian oversight. And I think that's sometimes lost. We are privy to things that the public is not privy to. And so it enables us to then think strategically and ask questions about what those processes are, and what those procedures are, and how they're being used, and whether they're being used in a way that sort of concurs with what a specific community, Ann Arbor in this case, is expecting out of law enforcement.
And he also sort of likened this to getting a second opinion from a doctor. You get the first opinion, but to have someone else, some other group say, yeah, this was right, or this was wrong. It helps the community to have that second opinion, like you would want a second opinion from your physician.
Yep. And I think some of the commissioners talked about how challenging it was to work in their particular environments, because they came from all different cities, and so they had very different working environments. And we can come back to that topic later when we talk about the focus group in which we participated, because there's a little bit of overlap with that as well. I'm going to be participating in a session on the 31st, on the 30th, on how to maintain your oversight, your enthusiasm while doing oversight, because it is challenging work. There are lots of setbacks, there's lots of resistance. And so how do you maintain your enthusiasm, your passion for oversight in the face of all that? That's actually the title of it. There is a session on Chicago on September 1st. There are some international sessions. There's actually a whole sort of focus group on jails and prisons. So people who are interested in incarceration might want to look at September 13th to 24th. There are quite a few sessions, some of them about the transmission of COVID in jails and prisons, oversight of jails and prisons. And although those things are not things that we oversee, since Ann Arbor does not have a jail, they are interesting to us in terms of process, and they certainly enhance our learning. And to become a certified practitioner of oversight, you do have to have a breadth of experience. And so people do need some credits, if you will, in different segments. So not just strengthening oversight or innovations in oversight, but also in jails and prisons. So you need a breadth of experience, and they consider that to be valuable. There is a session on September 24th about mental health assistance and partnerships with law enforcement. And I think that will be, relevant to us. There's a session on LGBTQIA communities and law enforcement. And then a session on police funding on October 4th. And then a couple sessions on racial equity. And so if anyone is interested in acol.org, you can certainly register for any individual session and learn about these topics from experts from all across the country and sometimes from out of the country as well.
Yeah. The other thing is when they were talking yesterday about the infiltration of white supremacy into law enforcement, that there was quite a bit of discussion regarding the First Amendment. And the line that I had from them was, First Amendment has limits for police officers by choosing to work in police departments. So, you could express your viewpoints and no one would impede that. However, if you choose to be in this kind of a position that you are in, there would be some kind of limits to expressing that. So it's just something we did not know. I think that
they were talking about that too from the perspective of cases that have been prosecuted and laws and statutes across the country. So it wasn't just sort of an opinion about what you could and couldn't do. They were talking about
Correct.
cases that had gone to trial, just to clarify. So
Correct.
So really interesting stuff, I think, for us, but even for members of the public who might not be interested in the whole menu, there are some specific options that would probably be useful as people begin to learn about oversight. I certainly invited members of City Council because on the 31st, I think one of the more important sessions is how the member selection and criteria of commissioners really impacts the work that oversight can do. And you all know that one of the 13 principles is independence. And so that we were working on that with an update to our ordinance in terms of trying to have more influence on selecting the commissioners that would do this work. And there were several council people who had questions about that and wondered why the process shouldn't be exactly the same as every other, board and commission in the city where, council selects who sits on it and then council votes, on those people, and why we wanted to have any more input in the process. And I think hearing from people across the country about how different processes work and how they could potentially work and the pros and cons of those, I think would be very important. I have sent an invitation to City Council a couple times. I'll try to remember to send another invitation a couple days before the event as well. But I think that's one that directly impacts the work that we do as we kind of think about how to move forward at 2.5 years old. I also wanted to talk about, and others should jump in here, the Act Now focus group participation. So Act Now is a group that sort of looks at reimagining policing and public safety in the 21st century. And they have been conducting focus groups around the country. I think they initially started with 14 cities, but it seems as if that has been expanded to some degree. So in this particular Washtenaw County area, they've had focus groups with lots of different kinds of people. They had focus groups with police officers, from Ann Arbor Police Department, from other municipal police departments, from the Sheriff's Department. They were interested in hearing from patrol officers, not necessarily command staff. So they were very specific. They had confidential listening sessions where people could could speak freely and they would not have to be worried about being identified later. They're doing a qualitative data analysis where they recorded the sessions, but not so that they would identify people, but rather so that they could then go back and be accurate about what was shared in each session. We participated in a session of oversight professionals, and we were able to invite people from the sheriff's oversight group, Cable, to attend with us and a couple of other local policing experts. And so in our focus group, the focus group was led by James Koppel, who is the co-founder of Act Now and who was the facilitator of President Obama's task force on 21st century policing, and so has been working in policing for quite a long time. We were also facilitated by Johnny Mack, who's a founding director of Realizing the Dream, and he works for the Martin Luther King Jr. Foundation and runs many of their programs. And so those were the two people who came to Washtenaw County and ran the focus group in which we participated. And they ran other focus groups with local activists and lots of other kinds of people. So people were able to give kind of their uninhibited, unvarnished, unedited feedback about what they thought about policing. And I think they had some broad themes. So it'll be very interesting to see their report. Their report will cull all of the work that they've done around the country and will be published much like the 21st Century Task Force on Policing was. So we're looking forward to seeing that. I think one of the things that came up in our group, and I'll be interested to see whether it comes out in the report, is looking at the difference between municipal police chiefs and sheriffs who are elected by the people, and the way that they're able to operate and the ways in which oversight works. And so that, I think that'll be really interesting sort of to see what they come up with. But we did that a few weeks ago, about 2 weeks ago, I think. Next, we have one of the more important things we need to do is fill our empty commission seats. And so we have we are all caught up now with pulling all of the applications for people who've applied to be on the commission. If anyone is interested in serving on the commission, please go and fill out an application. I've sent the last batch out to everyone and asked people to rank them 1 through 3. However, the last batch I sent you actually only had 3 applicants in it. So you can just rank them, you can just order those 3. And we will start connecting those people, and then groups of us will start interviewing them and having conversations with them and their interests and what they think they can contribute, and whether after talking about it, this is still something that they're interested in. And so we look forward to doing that in the next couple of weeks, and hopefully adding, you know, at least another commissioner and another commissioner as we go through the applicants. So if anyone is out there and is interested, please do apply. You can find the application on our website. Which is part of the city's website. You can just search for boards and commissions and search for ICPOC, and you'll find the application there. We have some unique questions, as you'd imagine, as compared to other boards and commissions. Occasionally we do get an error. We'll get one like for the planning commission, and I think that happened. We got at least one that was not meant for us, but so we'll be going through those, the ones that people have ranked the highest, and we'll start contacting those people. And we've been in contact with some applicants already, and we'll, you know, try to schedule interviews with them in small groups so that we're not, you know, subject to Open Meetings Act, and we can do that, and people can speak freely and confidentially with us about what their concerns are, their interests are. But we know that we need more people to help us do this work, and we need to bring more skills to the table. So it's interesting. One of the earlier sessions in the NACO conference this year was talking about how everybody needs a data analyst. Not a staff person that they can ask to do that, but a person on the commission who can analyze data and whose primary contribution is that. So if you are a data analyst out there and you have a feeling for civilian oversight, please apply, because we could definitely use your talents. As we ask the police department to be more transparent and begin to give us access to data, we'd like to be able to analyze that independently. Lots of police departments put out dashboards where they share information in a way that they like, but it's important for oversight to look at raw data as well and ask very different questions and analyze that data. And so we definitely have a need for that. Certainly the police department has recently hired a data analyst. And so we expect now that they will translate some of their information from their legal pads and other antiquated systems to, a digital format where we could have X's and O's and Excel spreadsheets. And so we're anticipating that coming very shortly. And then we'll, we could definitely use some help analyzing that. So, and then since we last had a meeting, we all participated in a strategic, well, not everyone, but almost everyone participated in a strategic planning session. Some people refer to it as a visioning session. It was very helpful for us to sort of think about our mission, think about what things we want to do, what things we need to be doing, and sort of prioritize those things and think about what we need to do in the next year. And we sort of broke them down into things that were major projects, more minor projects, things that could take years to accomplish, but we need to start working on now. Sort of more mundane tasks. I think they were called thankless tasks, like working on the budget and developing training programs. But also thinking about big picture things like how to enhance a relationship between oversight and the police, and between the police and the community, and between oversight and the community. And so we sort of tackled those things and prioritized them and ordered them. And we started and will continue to break these out into tasks and get everybody on board with sort of taking some tasks and running with them. Community outreach is one where all of us can certainly participate. When we get some new commissioners, we can certainly engage them in an outreach committee. But I think outreach is something in which all of us need to be engaged. I know many of you are already doing that. And we can do that in a systematic way as well. And so we need to think about communities where we really need to go and have some town halls and do some listening sessions and have people from all different persuasions and areas and walks of life come and talk about what they expect from law enforcement and oversight. Anybody else want to jump in and talk about the strategic planning?
I think you summarized that really well, and it's a work in progress. And the only thing we need is basically commitment on part of the members of our commission to be involved in that. So we have to have we have to be the lead on those different items that we have for now and for the future.
And I think too, as we have more people joining us, we can divide up the work better, and so people won't feel overwhelmed. I know the outreach committee proper has had some big wins in 2021 with developing the poster and getting that onto the city buses. And we certainly need more of that, but we need more outreach in small and big ways as well, talking to our neighbors, talking to people whom we don't know, talking to people who don't usually get invited to the table, and that means going to them. And so we need to start going out and having those conversations, which I know has been inhibited by COVID, and because of the Delta variant is still inhibited by COVID. So I'm not suggesting that everybody just go out and do that now. I say that thinking, hoping that, with some boosters, once we're able to take them, and some N95s, we might be able to engage with people, or as soon as we're able to safely do that. So I know Zoom isn't the best format for doing that all the time. And that has hampered us quite a bit since 2020 in terms of doing that. We haven't had that many in-person meetings, but that is something that we need to do more of, and go to people as soon as they're comfortable having us in their environment.
But also this will give us a chance to really come up with items or points that we need, or plans, strategies, because we cannot meet in person. No, we have a lot of time, so we can devote that to how we envision our interactions with the community is going to be, and where and how, and all that stuff that's related to. And when the time permits, we don't have to spend more time trying to find out how we're going to reach out to this community or that community or subcommunity.
That makes sense. We can use some of the time to plan, and then when it's time, we can just execute.
Correct.
Commissioner Walton.
I just wanted to check on the one of the ones listed there is the transparency in police records. And forgive my terrible memory, but I was not sure if that was more aimed at sort of officer history, because I know that there can be some stuff that's not seen there, or if that was more on kind of what you were talking about before of sort of, a dashboard of sort of operational metrics of sort of how things are going. And if it's latter, I would happily put my name on it.
All right,
my name on the former, but
right. I'm definitely thinking the latter, actually.
okay.
The chief and his team were working on, and I believe have finished up, releasing some really basic data about calls for service for 2019 and 2020. And so those are things that we can work with. I think as they get a handle on their data themselves and begin to get it in a more usable form, then we can ask better questions of them. But I think police records about calls for service and things like that are sort of the tip of the iceberg in terms of the kinds of things we're talking about. We were not talking about personnel records as much as like how many calls for intimate partner violence or domestic violence were there. Heaven knows one day we might even be able to do some, GIS, some mapping, and but just for us to have an understanding of what's going on where, because that also can help us understand of whom and where we should ask questions or do outreach. And so because we know different people's experiences are different, and so it just helps us do our work better. But we need to provide the public with as much information as we can about policing, irrespective of the ways in which the police do that. So even if they don't get a dashboard going, we certainly have the ability to do that with public facing data.
I think
And
there's
we
two
should
sides
do
to
that.
it. Yeah,
Yeah.
there's two sides. There's working with the data that we do have, but I think there's also visioning out what data would we like to have in the long term, which will mean that we can work with the police to help us get there sooner. I mean, we don't have to just wait for what's being provided. I think that we can ask and guide it. So I'd be happy to put my name down on that one.
Thank you. And so I sent the document around to everybody again, just so you guys can take a look at it and just shoot me an email with where you want to sign up. I know some people's names are on there already in terms of different things, but we have a lot more slots to fill. And so if we can do that, that would be great. Anybody else? Bonnie, were you going to
Yeah, I just want to say I wasn't able to be there at that meeting, but for all the people who were there, you guys did a fantastic job. It looks real good. So just wanted to tell you guys, good job.
Thank you. We went through a bunch of exercises to get to the work output that you saw. Some people had to write a letter to a person in the past, sort of talking about how policing has changed, and other people had to write a press release about how ICPOC was going out of business because there was no need for oversight. And what that did was force us to envision what it would look like to not have a need for police oversight, which was really, really helpful. It seems like sort of a silly exercise in 2021, but it was really helpful for us thinking about, wow, in a big picture sense, what would that take? And then thinking about how policing has changed and sort of like our nostalgic idea about policing, but what's sort of the reality and thinking about how that's evolved. And so that sort of got us in a space of then being able to better think about what the priorities were. And the process of doing the priorities was fascinating because everyone had different priorities. Some of us overlapped, but we each wrote them down individually and they were stuck on a board. We had an amazing facilitator in Katie Doyle. And then we moved them and shuffled them and made hierarchies, and it was really hard. And I think it was not easy. There was a bit of struggle. And there were some disagreements. I think everybody did not have the same priorities, but but it was a really interesting, I think the exercise itself was really helpful for us to think about what we needed to do. And it helps us think about, so what are we going to do in the next 12 months? And then what are things that we should work on beyond 12 months? And then as we revisit this every so often, we can look at what we wanted to do, how much of that we got done, or did we start working on even things past that? So it was a lot of work, but I think the work itself was very productive and very useful for us to start thinking about how to prioritize it. Because for me, it's often like drinking out of a fire hose, and I'm sure you guys feel that too. There's just so much all the time that it's hard. You know, I just kind of try to put out one fire and then go to the next thing, and then I don't do something else that I need to do because I've now got this other emergency over here. And so this helps sort of, at least for me, stay focused on the things that I should really be doing and sort of let some of the distractors fall by the wayside. So, but everybody take a look at the document, whether you're there or not there, and jump in where you feel like you can, because we certainly need all hands on deck. And we will be actively working on new commissioners too, so that we can add them to the process. Not that we're recruiting people just to make them work really hard, but everybody will work hard because there's more than enough work for 11 people. So, and then
Lisa,
Francis, I'm sorry, go ahead, Commissioner Harder.
Thinking about some of the information that I've been getting over the last few days at these ICPOC sessions, we have a lot of stuff here that we've come up with. But one of the speakers was saying, and I don't know if I totally agree with it, but I think we have to consider for our commission to decide what is the most important thing that we want to get accomplished this year. So we're not, you know, I mean, I know there are a lot of us and we're dividing up the work, but it would seem that it makes sense to prioritize and come up with, this is the most important thing we want to do. There could be a second most important, for if we wanted to prioritize community involvement, having meetings around, which we all know it's going to be hard, because I'm not going to any meetings with this Delta variant out. But maybe it's coming up with some suggestions for police training. I mean, I think maybe as we look at what we did at the retreat, maybe we can think about, are there one or maybe two things that are most important that at the end of this year we can say, well, we said we're going to do this and that thing has been done. So I'm just throwing that out there.
I think that has value. I mean, and I think that maybe if it's a big picture thing, then there are some of the tasks that fall under it. And so as you guys look at the quick wins, are the things that are probably things that are attainable, that probably could be done soon and with not as much effort. The major projects are things of great importance, but are going to require a lot more effort and time. But some of them do fall under umbrellas, right? Like community involvement. If you pick that one, that means outreach, that means listening sessions, that means increase awareness of our commission, space for community voices. So I'm looking at the document now, and all of those things kind of fall under that umbrella. Listening to third party or sort of outside partners. Those things are probably all under that same umbrella. So maybe if we decide that we have this one big picture thing we really want to focus on for the rest of 2021 or the first half or this fiscal year until June of next year, then we would just take on the tasks that fall under that. I think that's fine. And I think this commission could say that, say, look, this is the big picture thing, and these are the things we want to do. Vice Chair Teodoro Hargraves.
One of the things I noticed, the last page that prints out, if you print out the visioning document that Katie sent us, is a goals sheet. So I know for and you could do 2 of these, you could do 1 of these, but I think it would be good for each of us to do at least 1 and focus on one thing that we as individuals want to accomplish. And we may find out we have multiples. I know that my big thing is to get us all caught up on our complaint review. And we had a recent meeting with Deputy Chief Forsberg and Assistant Attorney Slay in changing that around so we can get caught up. And I think that, I'm sorry, Commissioner Billups, but you're going to be getting a lot of emails from me because I want to get the caught up and get us into a flow so that we're regular reviewing and we're getting caught up. And so I really think if we all fill out at least 1, 2, or 3, however you want to do it, and then we come back together and we find out who has some that are similar, that may help us break out into subgroups.
And we're probably we're going to need to have some sort of like working session before our next meeting too, because we need to hammer out some of this stuff and figure out where we want to place our efforts. Like, I know getting new commissioners is something that we will be working on no matter what, right? But whatever, if there are big goals that people want to focus on, then we need to focus our efforts there. And we might be able to have 2 big goals. And so Francis mentioned that sheet. If you look at the page right before that, it kind of talks about how to do the sheet. And so it's called SMARTY goals. A lot of times people use the acronym SMART: strategic, measurable, ambitious, realistic, and time bound. And so those are really important. But to be SMARTY, you also have to be inclusive and equitable. And so we want to think about that as well. But everything that we're doing needs to be, specific. It needs to be measurable. It needs to be actionable. So I don't think we should say we want to make the world a better place, which we all do. We should talk about how we might operationalize that goal. And so if you read page 6, it talks about, sort of how to do that. And then we each need to do the last page. So this was homework from her to us that we need to do. And then we need to come together, talk about it, figure out where we're going to focus, and then sort of hammer that home for the next fiscal year. And I know there are lots of tasks that, we can divide and conquer under a big umbrella goal, whatever you guys decide is the most important thing. And so maybe if we could commit to everybody doing that goal sheet in the next 10 days, that would be helpful. And then we could have, some sort of work session where we, sort of figure out what things we want to do and how we want to organize or focus our goals. And also keep in mind what we worked on in strategic planning. That's not to say we should be limited by that. If somebody has an idea that didn't come up then, or looking at what we came up with on that page 4 really spurs you, makes you think of a new idea, there shouldn't be anything that's off the table. But I do think we should keep in mind sort of what we did to kind of guide us, because we struggled so much to get that. And it was such an interactive, iterative process. And then pay attention to that beyond the next 12 months thing, and because there were some big picture things there as well. So
the one thing is also we should not spread ourselves too thin on having too many things to accomplish per a short period of time. What we can do is we can be more selective to things that we feel that they can be accomplished, can be done with measurable success or failure, versus, we are so, it's like, it's not putting a bit of butter or jam on a toast, spread it thin. We can't do that. I think we should be a little bit more as selective and efficient in what we are doing. One is the time. We don't have, free time as much as we want. So everybody's tied up in what he or she is doing. So whatever time we can sit together, that is the time that's going to be very like to work it in a way that the outcome of using that time is not a waste. It's like we really want to make sure that any of the tasks that we assign ourselves to do, one, have to be realistic, second, can be accomplished, and to show that, yes, I would love to see one thing that we do and do it right and show that it's successful than, bits and pieces here and there. We can't do that.
That's that. And I one of the things I worry about is burnout, not, just for me, but for everybody, because it is a thing that oversight professionals talk about, how hard the work is. And, people feeling underutilized, that's not good. People feeling overutilized. Unfortunately, I am going through a pretty serious family health crisis now. And I wasn't sure I would be here today. And so Francis is going to chair the meeting. But it has made me think about distributing the work. If I can't be here, if I am going to be absent, the ship, obviously it will be flying in Francis's hands. But like the amount of work I do, nobody should experience that vacuum. And so we need to distribute the work. And so that's important too, for people to feel engaged in the process and that their skills are being utilized. And I think, I haven't done as good a job of that as I can do and will do. And so that's part of this goal, is to spread that out. So everybody's doing a little bit. I don't want us to be spread too thin, nor do I want us to. And so those major projects. So those are those goals that we were talking about that are so big. Can you do them? Will it take you 10 years? Will it take you 5 years? And what are the things that could be accomplished in 12 months? And so we have to decide sort of, are we going to work on, a thing we can do in 12 months? Are we going to work on a thing we could do in 3 months? Are we going to tackle a thing that we can maybe see the end of in 3 years? I think everybody should have input on that, and you guys can decide, and then we can just kind of go point ourselves in that direction as everybody weighs in. But I think that's really, really important to think about that. Also, we're term limited, and so we're always going to have turnover. Mm-hmm. And so that is a challenge that, every commission doesn't face, and lots of oversight professionals do work for years and years and years and get more and more experience. That won't be the case for us. And so we're going to have to sort of sit with that knowledge that part of what we're doing is setting it up for the next sort of group. That's part of the reason why I've been so focused on processes and trying to do, things like that, so that Francis worked so hard on the process for complaint review, so that whoever comes in 10 years, it will be a piece of cake for them, where it's been a big struggle for us, just to sort of stay caught up because of how long it takes and how complicated it is. And it took a long time to get it this streamlined. And so those are growing pains of a new oversight commission, and that's fair. But I think we have to be aware of us being term limited too. Councilmember Romlau, you had your hand up too.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate, the conversation and a lot of realistic and humanistic thoughts coming out regarding, the work that's being done and the work that still needs to be done. And the fact is that this is an all volunteer commission, and everyone is coming here in addition to everything else they're doing, on top of COVID, which has really taxed everybody in different ways. So the last year and a half has been a challenge due to that, on top of just the work that this commission is set to do in normal times. So I think we need to remember to breathe and not be so critical of ourselves at times when, we have those moments. We feel burned out by the work and the other challenges that exist in life these days. So, and this commission has had a few vacancies now for several months. So, the pressure and the weight of that ongoing loss and sharing the workload, I think it starts to add up. You start to get more and more fatigued as more time goes on, and you're running shorthanded. And I think that needs to be acknowledged as well. And hopefully we can soon fill those with qualified candidates. I look forward to hearing what the commission recommends there. And I appreciate the time that went into this strategic planning. Unfortunately, I could not attend because of my day job that day, but I appreciate those who did and the report that we got. Looking into it, it seems like there's a lot of interdisciplinary goals and policies and things that you're going to do. So it's good to prioritize and try to make sure we stay on task and finish things. But it seems that there's a lot of ongoingness to all of this. There's not really in many of these sunsets. It's going to be a continuous process, and the fence posts will continuously be moved. So it's really hard to really understand, okay, where is the finish line in some of these? There is no finish line. I guess earlier you just talked about the importance of having a commission, and it's an ongoing, and it'll always be there. And many of these things I think will be on strategic planning documents for years to come, regardless of how much work people put into it. So I think it's good to have these exercises to refocus and be reminded of what we're charged to do, and I appreciate the work again. And so just wanted to say those things. Thank you.
Anybody else want to weigh on strategic planning or thinking about, obviously part of the goal of the day and then the days leading up to it and afterwards are all about prioritizing and making choices. And what are the things where we can have some quick wins, and what are the things where these are major projects. And it's absolutely accurate that some of these will be ongoing goals for forever, right? We'll always be trying to improve the relationship between the community and police and oversight and the community. We'll always be trying to strive for transparency. We'll always be striving for accountability. And so there are some things that will always be the case. We will evolve. I think one of the things that does get lost in this is that we are still a relatively new commission, and we've spent so much time setting up processes that now are done and will live on for the next 20 years. And those aren't things we talk about a lot, but they are things that consumed a lot of time and energy, and are things that we should be proud of. And I would say the complaint review process is sort of chief among those. I do not know how many calories it took Commissioner Tadoro Hargraves to do that. And she did the heavy lifting on that, on thinking about how things should work, and then thinking about how they could be improved upon, and then talking to police and the city attorney's office and working directly with them on that. And I was absolutely just a bystander throwing in one little idea at a time, and she did almost all of that work. And that is a thing that will last us for forever. I think we have some policies. We have a very reasonable training program that was developed by Commissioner Walton that will last us for quite a long time. The content can be updated, but the process is genius. And that is a thing we did not have. It is a thing we do now have, and it is a thing that people will have in the future. We don't talk about that much. We don't talk about how much work she put into it. We don't talk about, how well she did it, what feedback she sought, how she pulled all these different things together. That was a lot of work, but that's a thing that will be here in another 10 years. We're continuing to do training ourselves. And so everybody knows, I believe Thursday the 2nd, we'll be doing an in-person training. I think we should be good to spread out and mask up. And if you guys don't feel comfortable with that, let me know that now, and we'll see if we can sort of rearrange that. I don't know if we'll have to push the date if we're trying to do it virtually. I think probably not. I don't know. But you guys can let me know if you're uncomfortable with it, or if you feel okay masking up and showing up in person to do that training. But it's a different kind of training for us. It'll be about trauma-informed work. And it'll be very important for us to think about going forward, and sort of finding those opportunities for us to get trained and to work with people who are in the police department or work with police every day is really critical for us to understand the work that they do. And so, you know, those are things we don't talk about, but they take a lot of time and energy, and, you know, they exist. Commissioner Walton.
I just wanted to make one quick point and sort of reinforce on thinking about those goal sheets. You know, the first part is specific. And so even though a lot of these goals are things that may, you know, very well be things that continue long after our individual terms, I think the specific part is really important. And so if we can just think of, if you just take something broad, like, you know, improving relations between the police and the community, what's the next step? What's the specific next thing that we can achieve in a 3 to 6 month time frame? That's the goal for right now. Right? We can't write goals for these huge mountains. We'll never get there. But I think, you know, how we do get there is one step at a time. So when we're thinking about writing those goal sheets, just encouraging everyone to think about something that's very specific. It's on a relatively short time frame that can be done. Because I think that's really what we're trying to get to is what are the action steps rather than just continually discussing philosophy.
Yes, there's a time and place for philosophy. This is not that time, though.
Absolutely, and that probably came out slightly harsher than I intended.
No, I don't think it did. I think it was fine. We all need that. I mean, you know, because it is easy to wax about these big picture things, but what are actionable steps? And that's what we need to be doing. We will get to the big picture stuff through the action steps. So if it was harsh, it was fine. We all need a good comeuppance once in a while. Anybody else want to talk about strategic planning before we tackle our last agenda item? Go ahead. I'm sorry, Commissioner Othman.
It's just within the context of what we were talking about is the term limit that we have and the continuation of the commission after current members' terms end. What we need to have is for the new ones to basically come in and we'll have a folder for the things that either in-house training or external training or available material for them, so they don't have to go and spend quite a bit of time initially just trying to catch up. So if we have those things available for them, hopefully maybe this is one of the things that we need to develop over this year, is having that folder for new commissioners. And based on what we went through, based on our training, based on future trainings, etc. So if we have that available for them, that would be really a great help, and they will use that, and they will not spend as much time trying to be part of this commission. So I would feel that would be an important thing to do as we are going through other things. It's just also we have to work on the future commissioners.
Commissioner Tadora Hargraves, did you want to speak to that? This is actually a project that she's been working on. I've been pulling a lot of the journal articles that I send you guys in a PDF and thinking about printing those off, but she's actually been trying to work on a manual.
Yeah, I think for a while there was, you know, the thought that we could be able to put together the, you know, a binder, like you're saying, you know, something that when we bring in a new commissioner, Denise would be able to complete this binder and hand it to them, and they could go through and get ideas of how to set things up. I mean, there's things that I constantly am referencing, like our ordinance. I'm constantly going back to that document and rereading stuff. I'm always going back to even some of our early meetings, the work that we did early on, trying to remember, well, what was this idea? Can we use it now? And things like that. So that is definitely a goal that I would love to get to. I would love to get us to a point where any commissioner can go to City Hall and access anything that is reference material that Denise may be holding for us, like books. I know Lisa, Commissioner Jackson's done so many purchases of books for us, you know, and
my mobile library.
Right, exactly, you know, and things that that we need to have access to regularly, I think is just would make it so much more, I'm going to use the word fun, because I think that's one way we don't stress ourselves out, is that you get to go in, you get to have the interaction, you get to learn something new. And I think that if it can be done in an organized fashion, it does alleviate the stress. So I am totally with you.
We had a beautiful library in Denise's office, but I think we got it kind of where it was just before COVID. And one of the last things she did was she got someone to take all of those hardback books out, put them in a huge box and leave them for me. And I got some assistance and went and put them in my car. And you guys know, I just had them in the truck of my car, would drive around and give out books. And so we can, I think I don't have that many left now. It's great. You guys all have them. And so I can return the ones I have to Denise now after Delta, when we're sort of back permanently. And also all those journal articles that I kind of was sending out to people, we can print those off, have them there, and she can scan them so that we can save a tree, or she can print them for people, whatever. But then the training plan from Commissioner Walton needs to be a part of that binder. I am always referencing the 13 Oversight Principles. I am always thinking about those. And why is independence so important, for example? And so always thinking about that. One of the principles is access to information, access to people, meaning like deputy chiefs and chiefs, but access to information and access to data. And these are things that I'm constantly explaining to people, that we can't do our jobs if we don't have access to those things, and we don't have access to them now. And so I'm always referencing that. So I think Vice Chair Todora Hargraves has been thinking about making a binder. We were thinking about it before Commissioners Carter and Shipp came. And so we feel like we owe them one. Of course, Commissioner Carter is going to be so well trained up now. She won't need a binder. Probably Commissioner Shipp is as well. But I feel like we at least owe you two a binder. And so that is something, but it required for a while that we were there and able to Xerox hundreds of pages of stuff. And then we couldn't do it because of COVID. So I think the ways in which we have been stymied by COVID have been in some ways that weren't obvious necessarily, but we are getting on track with the training and the binder. So it is an excellent idea, Commissioner Offman, and Commissioner Todora Hargraves beat you to it.
Hey, that's fine with me.
So she's got a good head start on it already. And then with the advent of the training plan, I think it makes it a little clear, because some of the things in the training really do help you sort of get an idea of what oversight is supposed to be. It's not just a bunch of folks sitting around their living rooms thinking about, what's wrong with police. It's not about that at all. It's thinking about how to make your community get more information to your community, to make policing more transparent, and to be the person behind the scenes asking the uncomfortable questions. You obviously, one doesn't win popularity contests doing that, but somebody's got to be there to give that second opinion, as you talked about, and somebody's got to be there to ask those questions. And so those are the kinds of things that we can start thinking about as we get our binders together. So to segue, one of the things that we can think about as oversight professionals, and one of the opinions that we can give counsel, is thinking about ways in which policing can be different, or ways in which public safety can be different. You are all aware that council passed a resolution to examine unarmed public safety responses. That does not, I'm going to say this just because I got a couple questions about it, has nothing to do with reductions in force of police, none whatsoever. It has to do with the consideration of whether there should be other kinds of people responding to, say, mental health calls, for example, or substance abuse calls, or homelessness calls, just for examples, of people who may need assistance but may not need an armed police response. The city council charged the city administrator with coming up with a plan by December. And in the interim, lots of people in the city have been exploring that question. Some of us attended a session put on by the Washtenaw County Sheriff's Office in partnership with Community Mental Health about their version of what the county is doing and can do. And it was an interesting presentation. It did not answer the questions about what Ann Arbor could do. And I think for some of us, we were already pretty aware of what Community and Mental Health was doing. And they have a model that is called co-response, which means that many times when they respond to a call, they take an armed law enforcement officer with them. And their executive director was clear that she did so considering the safety of her social workers. However, the sheriff's office, and I believe even the Ann Arbor Police Department, had some data that showed that they did not always need to be on every call. And they actually had some data on a percentage of calls that they felt that they were not needed to be on. More recently, and I will send you guys a link if I didn't already, there was a discussion of 3 cities, Olympia, Washington, San Francisco, and
Denver, I think.
Denver, thank you, Colorado, and how they went to an unarmed public safety response for mental health calls. One person specifically talked about how they changed their 911 system. Now, we know the city of Ann Arbor does not have a 911 system. They ceded that to the county some years ago. But they were talking about how they changed their 911 system to train dispatchers to know when to send an unarmed mental health specialist to a call and when to send police to a call. We know there are city council people who have questions about that. Fortunately, some of them were able to attend that presentation. There was also a discussion of how do you collect data? How do you measure efficacy? But one of the things that was very clear was that police in all of those cities were relieved to not have to handle those calls. Police were happier to let mental health professionals handle those mental health calls. They felt like it freed them up to do other things. Clients felt better served by mental health professionals. Almost everyone deemed it a win-win. Several of them said there was some skepticism on the part of the police when they first started, but I think it was San Francisco person who said that now the police actually say, no, call them. Like they refer people to this other system now. And so there is, at least a mandate from city council to explore this possibility in Ann Arbor and how it might work. I do not think that means using what the county has necessarily. I think there is some evidence that could be improved upon, at least from the client perspective. And I think we have seen, and actually we're going to take a field trip. A couple of us are taking a field trip tomorrow with police to look at an example of this. And so I think it's important for us to think outside the box, and particularly to think outside of what Ann Arbor has in terms of thinking about an unarmed public safety response. There are council people who have said to me that they feel like we need ideas that we haven't seen yet in the city and in the county. And I think that is fair. I think no one is suggesting we reinvent the wheel. However, I think that Ann Arbor is capable of taking some of the load off police. I have heard Chief Cox say, there are things that they have to handle because they're the only ones open at 3 a.m. And that's unfortunate. And I would say, personally, it seems to me that we have defunded mental health. Community mental health has been defunded since the 1970s. Education's been defunded. And we've asked police to take on these jobs. And many police got into this field to help people. And they would like to do the jobs that they signed up for. Most of them did not sign up to be social workers. And so I think there is an ability here to get a job done better, to free police to do to do more police jobs that they would like to focus on, but can't because they have to do other calls, and to have clients better served by mental health professionals. Of course, there is a question of funding. Of course, there is a question of, how do you deal with the 911 system not belonging to the city? There are lots of questions, and none of those questions are questions that cannot be answered, addressed, or navigated. But it is going to take a commitment of work and energy to explore those. And so I would encourage everyone to sort of check out that presentation, but also check out other cities that are doing that. Brooklyn Center, Ithaca, New York. Both of those had very sweeping sort of ways of thinking about public safety. In Brooklyn Center, they have the police and fire and a Department of Community Safety that they'll have under the direction of a public health person who will be in charge of all of those things. And they will have a public health perspective, as they think about the operation of all of those areas. And community mental health falls under that as well. That may not be the solution for Ann Arbor, right? What Ithaca, New York has done as well. They spent a lot of time and they hired Philip Atiba-Goff to come in and kind of look at how they could do, change their public safety. But so there are a lot of models. And I think one of the take-home messages from the presentation is that not one city is sorry that they engaged in this. And so I hopefully we'll be engaging in these conversations in the next few months as the city administrator, the acting city administrator. Hopefully they will continue to work on this initiative such that we can talk about how we might do this better. Take some of the load off police, but serve clients much better. I've had people talk about sitting with a friend who overdosed with a police officer standing over them as they waited for the ambulance, and how terrified the person was to have an armed police officer standing there while they were in crisis. There's nothing against police, but that's just not whom they needed in that moment. You guys know I talked about someone who called before, I think, our last meeting and saw a person who seemed to be in trouble, but that person was terrified to call the police because they thought that the young person would be deemed a threat and would be handled as such. That's a very real concern for people. And I understand maybe if that's not you, you don't know that or believe that, or you haven't seen that. But that is a very real concern for many people, not just African Americans, but young people, poor people, undocumented people. And so I think we have to think about how we might mitigate that and serve everybody better. So there was a discussion of grants as well. So questions, comments, thoughts? I know several other people attended the county's. Vice Chair Tadora Hargraves, you had some experiences with some merchants.
Yeah, one of the things I think that was a big takeaway for me from that is from that meeting is that right now, the bottom line here in Ann Arbor is that our process, our system is that you call 911 and a police officer responds. I know the director of CMH did mention that some businesses in downtown do have direct access to CMH. She mentioned that they can call the main number and somebody would come out. But as Lisa mentioned, they've been defunded for years over time. And so their response time is really what's concerning too. So at least to me, I asked her, I put a scenario out. I said, if you're an individual and you're you're coming downtown, are parked at the top of a parking structure and you see a young person mumbling and pacing and you are concerned that they're in crisis, you call 911. And I have to say, Sheriff Clayton, Chief Cox, they all answered the question very, very well. The first thing was Sheriff Clayton said, you're going to call 911 and dispatch is going to dispatch an Ann Arbor police officer. And then From there, the officer arrives and the officer evaluates the situation, determines whether or not CMH is needed, and then they make the call to request CMH assistance. I then asked how long that response can be before a social worker arrives to assist the police officers. And whether it be at 4 p.m. in the afternoon or 2 a.m. in the morning, it's 30 minutes or more. And if you have somebody in crisis, 30 minutes is an eternity. I mean, it's just a lot. I mean, that's just a huge, huge amount of time. And so, you know, if that's what we have, if we know that's what we're going off of, then we need to come up with some more ideas. We need to come up with an alternative. I know the information managers attended leads training with our officers, and any other commissioners who would like to have that training, please let me know. But that is the de-escalation training that our officers have now, so that they can begin some kind of de-escalation during that period of time. But I think it's important for us to really understand what exactly do the Ann Arbor police officers have in their toolbox for this 30-minute wait time. What do they even have in their toolbox to make the decision that community mental health needs to be called? You know, I would really like more of an understanding, and maybe this is something Chief Cox can, or Lieutenant Dortch can help us get scheduled, to get an understanding of what police do to evaluate the situation, to decide whether or not CMH needs to be called. I think the field trip Lisa's mentioning is here downtown, and when, you know, you get a call about, say, our unhoused population that's getting aggressive with the pedestrians on the street, or they're blocking sidewalks, you know, what is the indicators that CMH needs to be called, or do police just move them along? You know, how does that all work? So there's a lot, I think, that we need to understand what's going on, but also coming up with how we can improve that current process.
You know, I think there is collaboration among different entities in the county, like SWAT team or some fire departments, where certain tasks are basically shared by the county. Why we should not have something similar to that, like SWAT team, basically a combination of police officers and mental health specialists, maybe a social worker, just to be there. And if they are dispatched together, this means that you don't have to spend 30 minutes trying to evaluate the individual, whether what type of help that individual needs. So I think that could be, if we cannot do it singularly in Ann Arbor, why don't we have it as a county? Because anyway, the 911 call goes to the county dispatcher. So I think that's something that should be looked into, maybe not now, but to combine the efforts into this comprehensive kind of dealing with situations. If it requires a police officer to be there and to do their work, that's fine. They are there. If it's mental health specialist, that's fine. If it's a social worker, that's fine. So at least we should have something that would alleviate and reduce the time between moving from one entity to the second. And that might be life or not of an individual.
Chief Cox.
Yeah. To make reference to Francis' question. If we show up to a call, basically our purpose is there a nexus to crime? Is there a nexus to violence where someone, is in fear of their safety or concern around that? Outside of that, then that's when we would probably reach out to CMH when clearly it's a behavior issue or something else that we are, that there's no nexus to crime and things, surrounding that. Of course, while we're there, we're not going to leave a person alone at a scene or what have you, but that's really the issue. If they're not committing a crime, if they're not threatening someone, if they're not, some form of violence or potential violence around that, then our services aren't really needed other than maybe making sure the right people get there, and until that happens. And so that is really, I think the answer to the question I think you might have presented, if that helps.
No, that does help. And I think that's another thing that goes to what Chair Jackson was saying a little earlier. If you take all of that into consideration, a police officer could be there waiting for the right person to show up for quite some time. Whereas if we were to come up with another type of program where police are not the initial people called, those police officers can be out doing something else that is more in their wheelhouse of what police officers do. And so I think there's definitely a lot out there that needs to be discussed, and I think that a variety of groups need to be at the table.
I think we were kind of disappointed that at least the conversations with the county were so segmented, that oversight was in one, council were in different ones, because I think there was not an opportunity. All we do is think about oversight. We are one trick pony, where council has to think about lots of different things. And so there were things that we noticed in the presentation that probably would have been interest to council, but council would not have known to ask about them. And so then when I got questions from council members after they knew we'd been, I could say things and they were like, well, hey, that, and I said, well, remember that slide you saw, this actually means this thing. And they were like, oh. And so I think we do need to have some conversations with many different kinds of people at the same table at the same time. So there isn't, so there's an opportunity for crosstalk and conversation and collaboration. That includes, mental health professionals and public health people, lots of people, housing people. Councilmember Lowry.
Thank you. Yeah, I was invited. I think I was at the first meeting that the sheriff and county mental health professionals came in and gave us the presentation that they then gave everybody else who had the opportunity to see it. I thought it was extremely valuable. I learned a lot. I was excited that was what they were going to be rolling out with to the rest of the stakeholders and interested parties. It's just, I know for them, perhaps just like everybody, scheduling is an issue, and OMA violations and all that. So how you get everybody under the same umbrella in the same tent at the same time is a challenge. I would just ask, and as the liaison, and as somebody who actually helped to go out and find that money for this type of program, to tell us what your concerns are, so that we do incorporate that when we get that recommendation. Maybe those recommendations that you have or the concerns will already be with what the city administrator presents council. It's unfortunate that there's been a change at that position in the respect for this goal. I know that Mr. Crawford will continue, I believe, in some capacity with the organization so that there is a transition. And this is one of the key points and key policy issues, I hope, is transitioned properly as he had started assembling this. And I think it would be a tragedy if it wasn't handled properly as the transition goes forward. I look forward to seeing what comes of that, and hopefully your concerns are embedded in the recommendations that come back to council. And please reach out to us if you would like, and I would invite you to that opportunity to discuss it with myself and Councilmember Song and others, so we don't violate it. OMA and talk about what those issues are. Councilmember Radina and Councilmember Nelson being on the Human Rights Commission, I think would be somewhat of a natural fit with that conversation. Thanks.
Yes, no worries. We will certainly give some recommendations, and we know different people participate in different capacities. So I think, if the city isn't sort of doing listening sessions with the community to see what they really want, or, I had some council members who expressed some interest in meeting. So one of the suggestions from one of the sessions was that Ann Arbor City Council needs to consult with City Council in Denver, City Council in San Francisco, so that you guys can talk about concerns unique to legislators. You guys' concerns are different than our concerns. So Oversight's concerns are very different from City Council. You guys got budgetary stuff, you got to worry about optics and a whole bunch of other things that we don't have to worry about. And so one of the suggestions is that you talk to council members in those cities to see what were the pitfalls. How did things look in the beginning? How did they turn out? Most of these programs are a few years in. How did it work out for them? And that oversight professionals talk to oversight people in those communities. Public health people have those conversations in those communities. And so some council members did reach out to me. Some attended that presentation, and they were like, okay, I want to talk to these people in Denver. One person suggested they fly to Denver. I was like, hey, it's free to Zoom. So you guys don't even have to spend money. You can just Zoom. And all of these people were really willing to talk to their counterparts. And so I think it's important that we make recommendations, but my sincere hope is that council is also exploring options as well, and that you guys are taking, we know you guys don't have any more time than we have, but we hope that you are, taking some time to learn about these things too, not just from the county, but from other cities who have already sort of made this transition, because it's a little bit different than what, we're talking about here. But, there's lots of different ways to do it, and it's got to fit Ann Arbor. But I think it is important to think about, what unarmed public safety responses could look like. And this is probably not a flash in the pan. It's not a response to George Floyd. Many of these programs started before then, have been in operation since then. And they had pretty well fleshed out processes to get started, to collect data, to show their usefulness, and then get institutionalized funding. And so that's certainly a process that could happen in Ann Arbor. But, we do have to rely on the will of council to some degree. So we will absolutely make recommendations in that way. And we'll keep exploring, options. And so I'll make sure that everybody has, information. I'm sending the commission information all the time on these different programs. So, and we'll try to make sure that you guys get those as well. Councilmember, did you have your hand up again, or did you not put it down last time?
I just,
Okay.
one of the things, and I'm sure more conversations have been had since I was in on that initial meeting. But, dispatch becomes, it's a central nervous system currently for these services and agencies. And so, yes, we'd like to be autonomous and be a leader and do things differently as a city, but we are now confined with the fact that the 911 dispatch system is run by the county. And, I need to learn more, but it seems like, all roads run through Rome. That's where, you have the resources and the problem in trying to customize a policy that's for Ann Arbor. And so, and one of the takeaways that what I hear throughout all conversations mostly is resources, whether we have the financial resources or whether we have the human capital. And the human capital is in short supply when it comes to the kind of services the county mental health needs. And, I will just put that out there that we are in short supply of the resources that we'd like to have to address many of these things.
I think that is a really important point, and it is one that the sheriff's office makes often. It certainly would be difficult to customize and have Ann Arbor do something different than Saline or Chelsea or anybody else in Washtenaw County, for example. It is not impossible to do that. And, for example, the county didn't always have 911 dispatch, right? Ann Arbor had their own dispatch at one point, and it at some point, I'm sure it seemed, odd to think of giving it to the county, but there it is now. And so I think that to suggest that we can't explore doing anything different in Ann Arbor because all dispatch runs through the county means that we should just stop talking about it now, and we should just give up the process because that's how that is, and that's how that's going to be. I don't accept that to be an inevitability, nor do I think that is the rate limiting factor. And so I think that we can continue to explore options. And I was, two things I did mention that I hope didn't go unheard. One was how people attained grants to begin to do this work, and then provide data and show its usefulness and its cost savings. And two, how 911 dispatchers were retrained to redirect calls. And so that is certainly something that can be done. It's already been done. It's not even that new. And so I don't think that we should say, well, the county has 911, we don't, therefore, we can't do anything. It's not just that the 911 that the county has the 911 dispatch system. It also means they have lots of data that Ann Arbor doesn't even have, because they own the data. And so I think there are, as Oversight begins to ask questions about calls, there are other questions that come in terms of, well, what happens when Ann Arbor doesn't even have control over its own data about calls for service? So I think there are a number of questions. I don't think any of those things I am not naive in saying that those things can't be overcome. I'm not suggesting it's easy by any stretch of the imagination, but this is something we think about a lot. And so I think the presentation that happened from the county was one perspective. And I think it was, it was their perspective on what they wanted and how they wanted to handle things. And that makes sense. It's not a big change from what happens now, actually. But I think that we need to continue to examine some other options in the interim. We have till December, so we may as well use the time to do it. And so I think we can do some creative and interesting and more progressive, more helpful things, particularly around mental health calls, because people are not being served so well the way things are right now. And I don't think anybody really argues that point. I mean, the police kind of showed that data, community mental health showed that data. So I think we're super clear on that. No reports from specific committees today, correct?
Just to update you on, we had a couple of meetings between the Human Rights Commission and ECPAC about the crew report, and we were talking about what are the resources available for individuals who are finishing their terms in jail or prison to really integrate into the community. And also we talked about the factors, the likelihood of individuals to go back, and the rate of recidivism in the county is about 46% or something like that, versus 26 in the state level. So what are the factors that are making our citizens over here go back? And there was a talk about probably having students of one of the professors to look at individuals who are going to be released and follow them over time and see what are the factors that might contribute to their success in the community or not. This is one of the factors. The other thing is also there was Leslie, the chair of the Human Rights Commission, invited Mary King, who was the director of the Michigan Prisoners Reentry Initiative in Washington County for a number of years. And she came and talked about the MPRI that was initiated by former Governor Granholm way back in early 2000s when she was, and there was a budget of about, I think, $48 or $50 million to cover that for individuals to entry into the society. And when Governor Snyder assumed governorship, basically they reduced the budget to about $12 million. And one of the issues that she was talking about, that when this initiative started, they regretted the fact that it was not incorporated into as line item in the budget. So it was used by the Department of Corrections to do whatever they want to do. So really the money that was supposed to be used for rehabilitation for individuals to re-assimilate into the community is not there. So this is one of the things that she was talking about. And also she was suggesting to us to invite a gentleman who went through the process and really succeeded, Mr. Harry. And he has I'll just tell you one thing over here. He has a successful business in Detroit. I think it's called Here and Back Transportation. So he probably might be coming to talk to us about that. So this is one of the things that I had participated in. The other thing was with also Attorney Slay and members of the from City Council and others talking about the facial recognition technology that they are working on ordinance to ban that in the city. So these are the some of the activities I was involved in the past few weeks. That's my report.
Thank you. And thank you for reminding us about the facial recognition technology work that is ongoing. I know you and I were both in that meeting. And I remember one of the comments that you made about, you know, if you're going to do it right. And so I know the city attorney's office is working on that with members of the city council to, you know, have some aspirational kind of language around that. And then maybe inspire other people to join in on the cessation of using facial recognition technology. So thank you for reminding us about that. Anybody else? Anything for the good of the community? Commissioner Carter? Wait, you're muted.
Sorry. It got me thinking when Commissioner Offman was talking about looking at recidivism and reasons why that occurs. You know, I was at I was in one of those focus groups for Act Now, and one of the gentlemen, the one you indicated had been on the presidential various committees and so forth, was saying that he did a study, and I want to say it was in Wichita, but I could be wrong, of gang members. He interviewed 600 gang members and looked at their backgrounds. And what he found is that 40% of them in school had been labeled gifted and talented. And they had never been given the opportunity to be placed in any gifted or talented programs. And so as a result, they just sort of spun out of control and went into the gang life. And I wonder, I was listening to the gentleman who has now been selected as the Democratic candidate for mayor of the city of New York. He's a former policeman. And he said something that has just stuck with me. He says, you know, liberals, we're always trying to, it's like people are drowning in the stream and we're grabbing them out of the stream and trying to save them. He says, why don't we ever go upstream and find out how they got in there in the first place? And I that has stuck with me. I think that's part of our problem as we look at recidivism. Nobody has, you know, not just will they offend again, but hey, how did they get there in the first place? What happened? Everybody's got a story. And I think, you know, as we look at police interactions, both the police and the people that they interact with, to realize that we need to often look upstream rather than continuing to try to pull folks out of the water as they
Maybe stop
almost
people
drown.
from getting in the water in the first place is what you're saying?
In the first place.
In the first.
In the first place. So I just throw that out.
That's some big picture stuff right there, Commissioner Carter.
It is.
You know, education, access to opportunity. We don't say the achievement gap anymore. We say the opportunity gap, and being labeled gifted and talented, but not having the opportunity to exercise those things means you got a lot of bored kids who are looking for other things to do. And in a system where there's not a lot of community supports for that, that's significant. Although I hate to, I mean, I as a psychologist, I'm really good at looking at individual stuff, but I think we really have to look at the institutional structures, right? So as you're saying, look upstream and what is not there. So really important. I was trying to Google and see if I could find the study that he did while you were talking. And I did find a bunch of papers that James Koppel authored, but not the one on recidivism exactly. There was one related to alcohol, but that's not the one you mean. So if I find it, I'll send it to everybody. I'll do a better search. I was trying to do it while you were talking.
It was very interesting, and what he said happened. When he gave his report to the gentleman who was in charge of the public schools, they took the report down to the person who was in charge of the gifted and talented program. He said, why aren't these kids getting the benefit? And he says, well, we don't put poor kids in these programs. And he was fired right on the spot. So it is interesting if we could find it, but.
Well, I will look harder. I'll look in the academic library. I was just on Google, so I can do better. And I will send it to everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you all. If there is nothing else, is there a motion to adjourn?
Do we want to see if there's anybody waiting?
Oh, I'm so sorry. Yes. Ms. Janess?
No, I don't have anyone.
I think there was a discussion offline about how we are perhaps not exactly live on TV. And so if people wanted to call in, it might be a little bit of a delay or something. So I'll ask CTN about that as well. But all right, given that, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Is there a second?
I second.
You guys are reversed
Yeah.
this time. All in favor of adjournment?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, thank you all so much. We are adjourned, and look for some emails from me about some work group work. So please do the Smarty form. Think about things we want to accomplish 3 months, 6 months, whatever they are. And then, and look for some emails